Okay, we're live, I think, after all these technical issues. Well, awesome. So let's talk about what we're about to build today. So this is the app we have today. We have here. This is I called Pulsar. It's a dependency scanner. And the idea of this app is actually help us identifying issues we have with our node modules. Let me actually replace this screen. Awesome, here we are. So with this one, with this app called, we can use the native APIs because it's a Tauri app, and we can actually select it to scan a certain amount of in our file system. In this case, I'm going to scan every file that I have inside this crab directory. I select it like this, and then once I click scan, because it's built on Rust, it's so fast. So it takes 1 second to go through all my node modules and measure each of those files and brings me back the size of that node modules. So with this, we're going to build it using SolidJS and for the UI part. And we are going to use 1 second. Okay, so I'm sorry, we are in the wrong link. We had some issues with the previous link because our streaming software. Anyways, let's go back at it, and I'll just give a go and retweet the right link. So. So with this one, so now we can create this app, and for the sake of this little live stream, what we're going to do is I'm going to start from scratch using the templates that come with our Tauri CLI. But in the meanwhile, what I have for you is this one over here, which is this template that I created that already has out of the box SolidJS, Tailwind, and Tauri integrated. So that's exactly the stack we're going to use. So if you want, you can come over here. I'll share this link on the chat, and if you want to follow along, you can come over and we can work on it together. But in the future, you can just use that. It's not built in the CLI, so I suggest you using the Git for it, which essentially is gonna do a shallow copy of the repository, and then you can install the way you see fit, or you can do a git clone without pulling up the whole history. And yes, so for the sake of my muscle memory, I'm gonna use Tailwind. I'm gonna use PNPM, to create a new Tauri app. So I'm gonna call PNPM create Tauri app, and then our new app we're gonna call I'm gonna call Pulsar because that's the name I chose, and I'm gonna set it up with TypeScript and JavaScript, and I'm gonna use PNPM, and here we can select solid with a TypeScript flavor. That's about it, and now we can cd into Pulsar and get started with VS Code. So to run a Tauri app, first thing we're gonna do is install our dependencies, and then we have the Tauri command to actually go through and build and work on development mode. But first of all, let's have a look at how our directory looks like. So let me adjust the screen so we take up maximum space. So what comes in this template? It's actually quite cool. So from here we get the VS Code recommendations, which is going, if you don't have it installed, it's going to recommend you installing the Tauri VS Code extension and the Rust analyzer, because our backend is going to be built in Rust. And it comes with the default UI for a SolidJS app, which is the default with the default template for every Tauri initializer. And then the source story is where the Rust code works and where the lives and where the magic actually happens. So for the Tauri, we have this config, which comes working out of the box. What's going to do is run the dev command for your UI, and then when you run the dev command for the Rust part, and then you have some APIs we can set it up. Some icons are already here, so we can just replace with our own once our app is ready. You can establish the CSP, and you can define some other important values for your app getting started. So to get it running for the first time, what we do is PNPM Tauri dev. The first one is going to take a little bit longer because then Cargo is bringing everything up. And I have a dev server running somewhere. 1 second. And yes, it's, of course, it's the app I just showed you in the beginning of the stream. So now that I stopped the app, because it's hard-coded on the same port, so if the port is occupied, it just fails. We can switch the port afterwards if we want, but it's important for Tauri that Vite has the port hard-coded. So now Rust is installing the dependencies, and bada bing, we have our app running already. So this app is a native app. It's using the Rust backend to connect with the native system APIs. And we have SolidJS building the interface, which means that now if I say, if I want to greet myself, what's going to do is the SolidJS code, the TypeScript code, is going to invoke a handler in the Rust code, which is then going to run the code and bring it back. So this is how it works. What we're going to do now is I'm going to stop the server, and we're going to start setting up Tailwind for our app. So first of all, before I do this, the way let's have a look at what's already built in. So we have in our app over here, we have the typical SolidJS app. If you are a JavaScript developer, or if you're familiar, you might not even be entirely familiar with with SolidJS, but if you're already familiar with JSX, it's gonna make some sense to you already. What happens here is we create a signal, which is a way of managing data in our SolidJS app. So this is purely everything normal as any SolidJS app would do. We create this greet message with an empty string. We create the name and the set name, and these are just a controlled input. So whenever there's a on change, we're gonna set a new value for this input. And when the user clicks the greet, it's gonna trigger the submit event, and the submit event is gonna call the greet method. This greet method is when we make the jump towards Rust. So the greet message is gonna await for this invoke handler. This invoke is part of the Tauri API. And it's a way of us saying, okay, so now you go to Rust and you're going to call the method with this name and you're going to pass these parameters. Once that is done, we can come here to the source, and we have in source, we have our main, which is where Rust code starts running. So there's a little bit of boilerplate here. We're not going to touch this. And then we have a macro explaining that this function is actually a Tauri command. This means if you're a JavaScript developer, this means that Rust has some built-in functionality. So it's going to essentially extend this little function with some of the Tauri namespace and Tauri APIs that are required to make everything works. What's gonna go down then is that once this function is called, where it's setting up, it's gonna return a string, and then we return this template string just interpolating our name inside that variable. This is how the greet function works. And then the main function is what controls our entire Rust program. And then what we're going to do, we're calling actually Tauri builder with the default configuration. And we are defining an invoke handler. So this is where we actually say to it, yeah, you're going to pass this number of methods. In this case, we have only one, which is greet. We pass this one method here, and then we run everything. And then if something happens, this is our error handler. So it's going to say error while running your Tauri application. That's it. That's what we have in our app right now. Let me find a way to see the chat, because I just got carried away and I stopped looking out for what you might have been saying. And oh my God, where's the chat? There you are. Awesome. So first of all, I promised I would put my the repository I mentioned before in the chat. Let me get the link of that again. So this repository, create SolidJS, Tailwind, Tauri. The name is actually a mouthful, but you know, I've been living in Germany for way too long. Yeah, so there we are, and let's get started. So just a quick recap of what we are attempting to build today. Let's go to let me stop this server again, and we start the other one. So this is Pulsar. We're going to start building this UI, and we're going to make the first call to the native API that's actually going to bring up the folder selection API from Rust from within our system here, so then we can select one. Let's do it. So first I'll close this and let's get the Tauri app running again. We don't need this one anymore, and I'll put it right here for now under me, and great. You are not seeing my bar because I'm not using it, and that's it. So setup done. We can start first by removing the SolidJS logo and cleaning up our markup a little bit. So let's call this one Pulsar, and what gives? Oh yeah, I broke it over here. So yeah, I broke the JavaScript code. Awesome. So that's it. Let's start setting up Tailwind. The first thing we need to do is actually add the dependency. So pnpm add Tailwind, post CSS, and auto prefixer. So these are the ones that are required to get Tailwind up and running. That's a bit boilerplatey, so let me get some cheat code over here. So first of all, we're gonna add the tailwind.config.ts. There you go. So this is basically saying, yeah, that those are the files I want you to keep tabs on for the just-in-time compiler. And then we need to also set up this little empty file for post CSS config.js. Oops. There we go. With that done and out of the way, we should be good to go with this setup and add our Tailwind classes up top over here. This is actually not the right CSS file. This is the app CSS file. We actually want the styles CSS file, which is the main one. We're gonna get rid of the app CSS file in a minute. Great. Now there's one last thing that I need. I got this nice nice image from Unsplash. That's copyright free, but let's give props to who deserves some props, which is Paul Folkmer. Yeah. We bring it over to public. There we go. And with that, we can start our server again. Here you go. You see it's already changed a little bit because Tailwind kicks in with their very aggressive pre-flight CSS. So a lot of these is actually useless right now, but I'll take a while to clean up. I just want first to add some extra functionality, and maybe we can already change the event handler because poking up with the native API is way cooler. let's do this. So now what we're gonna do is back into our app, and we can get rid of this part. See how it hotly reloads? I love this. And then instead of the greet, we're going to say, let's now select a directory. So now if we click, this is not going to do anything because we got rid of the name part. We not sending this anymore. We can actually remove this completely at this point. But yeah, let's do it in a moment. The first thing I want us to do is create the scanner component. So the structure we're going to set up is we're going to have some components, and this one, the scanner one, is the one that's going to define the filters, define how our scanning function is going to work. Let me just check if my OBS is behaving well. And awesome. So export function scanner. We're gonna have these scanner props, and the scanner props for now we're just gonna have to set the list. And the list is gonna be an accessor, which is gonna have this folder stat that's coming from something else. But for now, let's do just an empty array at this point, because this is gonna be the return from what we have. And now the get root scope, which is what we want to implement, it's gonna be a function inside this, and an asynchronous function called get root scope. It's gonna return the selected scope, and we're gonna wait for open. And as you can see, it's already recommending me from the API dialog. That's exactly what I want. So the open takes a configuration object, and in this case, we want to select directory. We don't want it to be recursive, and we don't want to allow multiple files at this point, just to keep things simple to us. Once this is done, we can then check if we have an array, which I'm not entirely sure we can have an array at this point because multiple is set to false, but we need to make sure it's like that. And if it's an array at this point, I'm not going to do anything. If it's not an array, which means it's going to be a single string, a path, we are going to set the root scope for that. The root scope is just going to be a plain signal in this case, and just a string that's going to store the file, the directory we want to look at. So with this, we already implemented the invocation for the SolidJS for the Rust API. So without even touching Rust code, we are already calling Rust, and we can then show here what the root scope is gonna be. So if we click on the button, select directory, and then we are gonna show down here in the span what is our root scope. That's it. And that's about it. So I can come back over here and I forgot to add the onClick handler to get root scope. So what's gonna happen here is that if the select directory button is clicked, we're gonna open the dialog and we're going to put up the path of that directory we just found. Let's see if that works the way we want it to. So instead of this, now we're gonna remove it completely and I'm gonna add my scanner component. And why is it complaining? So this can go away, this can go away, and these both can go away. Oh, thanks, Amir. So if multiple is false, it won't be an array. So it's just a method signature there is PR to improve. Ah, okay, that's great. So there's good PR to solve that in soon. So what's going on here? Oh yeah, set list. We don't actually need set list at this point. I got carried away. Let's take this one out. And so we have a select directory. What's going on here? What did I break this time? Unhandled promise rejection. I must enable on the allow list, of course. Yes, so this is the thing. So Tauri is gonna come. Tauri is a very security-aware framework in the sense that if I don't enable the APIs, they are not gonna be available for my app. So you need to be intentional about the kind of APIs you're going to use in the system for. So what I need to do now is stop this, come here to my Tauri app, and in the Tauri config, we have the allow list, and I'm gonna enter the dialog. And here you can go one by one to what you want. We're actually gonna use just the ask, but just so for the sake of this stream, I'm gonna enable all of them now. So running everything again. Where's my app come? So now you see if I click, there is going to be something showing up that the call went all the way to Rust. And now I can set it up. And then once I click on open this specific file, I get the absolute path of this file in the directory that I selected. So now we are ready. We can essentially start setting up what is the root of the scan we want. Of course, we're far away from being able to actually scan anything at this point, but as you can see, we are already touching the native APIs thanks to Tauri without even writing any Rust code. So the Rust code is actually, we can delete and have it plain at this moment, because what's happening is that the API, that the Tauri apps API is carrying up all the heavy lifting for us. So with this, we can then receive that in and send it. We can now actually start sending this data to Rust, because the whole file system scan is gonna happen on the Rust side. So let's implement a new button that's going to be our scan button. So This one I'm just gonna copy paste because it has a lot of CSS, and it has this the only interesting thing of this button is this derived state that calls has scope, which is essentially a boolean that we are going to derive from the root scope. So now that I have the root scope over here, I can come here and define my has scope as a derived state. So it needs to be also a function, otherwise we're going to fall out of the reactivity from SolidJS, and this is going to be root scope converted to a boolean. So now whenever there's root scope is defined, I get this has a scope, and then if we don't have scope, this is gonna be this button is gonna be disabled, and we have the disabled link over here. So where's my Tauri app now? So now it's off, and it looks terrible at this point. We need to fix this our styles, but this is now is ready to scan our file. So it's with this one we can start sending data to Rust, and that's what I want to show you today. How we're going to send this data and receive this data on our Rust code. And for that, we're going to start creating some commands. So the first command we're going to create is at this point right over here. We're going to create this function called get directory data, which essentially is what we want in the end. And this is going to send out a root. That's going to be the root we just got. And it's going to return the invoke so we're gonna pass this invoke method that's gonna say, okay, this is the name of the method in Rust we're gonna send, and this is gonna send out the root. So with this method, we can now just call this get dir data, and this is gonna send over to Rust. And I'm just gonna pass as pattern for something else we need later. And now we can create our last method in this scope, which is the scan. Oh, my music just stopped. I didn't realize. Anyways, let's just add it to the list of technical issues I'm going through on this stream. So we have scan, and here we can actually start even collecting some data. As if you remember, I was actually measuring how much time we get between for scanning all the files. I think that's an interesting thing for us to know. So in this case, because we're still working on it, I'm gonna define it here that we're starting the scan at this point. This is gonna be a time in milliseconds. And then we're going to have the list that's going to come from this get dir data that we're going to pass with the scope over here. And once this is done, we're gonna take another performance, and finally we can add a console log saying when it ended and how much time has elapsed between we sending it and getting it back. Once this is done, we can set this scan time for this elapsed time, and we set the list. At this point, we're not gonna show how big our list is at this point, but let's create yet another signal for the scan time. So the scan time is going to be 0 at this point, and yeah, we don't need to. And we can just add over here. So TypeScript is okay that we're using every variable we're creating. Awesome. And the last thing we need to do now is call this method, and then we are good to go to Rust. So because I set this as a submit button, what you can do is actually create a form. For the sake of this code, it wouldn't make that much difference if you're going to set it in the onClick event of this button and then replace it. But for this code, we're going to do a form. And we have this event that we need to prevent default. And lastly, we are going to call the scan with the root scope as parameter. Oh, if it's defined, which it's gonna be, we need to add some type safety here, but at this point, this event won't be able to fire if scope is not defined. So here, just TypeScript got lost with the accessor, but we can fix it out later. The list is of type unknown anyway, so let's just console log the list. And that's about it for our code over here. So we can, if we come over here, we select root, and then we see that our scan is available. But right now it's not gonna go anywhere. It's not gonna do anything because we don't have our Rust handler created. So we need to create this get dir data at this point in our Rust code. So let's go back to it and to our Rust side, because a Tauri stream is not complete without some Rust. And we're gonna go back to our main function, closing everything, and Tauri main. Here we go. Let me check out. Yes, we're good. And for now, I can just take out our app a little bit, take out to the side, and we can work on our code solely. So let's start by removing our greet function that we don't need anymore. And what we're going to do is create an asynchronous function that's going to be get dir data. This is going to receive a pattern that's going to be a borrow stir, and it's going to return a result that's going to be a vector of folder. Oh yeah, this is for later. No. This is going to be a vector off. This needs to be eventually. We're gonna make some typing interoperability. Oh my god, we're gonna sync some types between the JavaScript land and Rust. So in the future, we're gonna use something called Tauri Spectre, and that's why I'm looking at the finished code and I'm trying not to scope creep this stream. So I'm trying to remember this is gonna be a tuple of a stir and a u size or an error. And yeah, that should be it. So in this case, what's gonna happen is Rust has this result type, which is in Rust, we always need to have error handling. So I have here the results, which is gonna define what is the type of a successful run of this method. But if the method can fail, which it can, we need to also handle the error command. So what we're going to do at this point is not much really. We are going to get this and we're gonna print this line saying, yeah, the patterns here. And that is gonna be all for here. And now we need to replace the get your data over here. And the error is not actually accounted for at this point. Yeah, I need to get my, yeah, Rust is not as okay as TypeScript in this case. I need to get myself out of this pickle in a minute. And so what I want to show you that I just remember it would be nice to have is in Rust, it's nice to have some log methods. So for our development sake, eventually I'm gonna want to show you how to log, how results are getting logged out eventually. And oh yeah, we could. This, we're gonna do this, and then here we can say, yeah, it's okay, and it's gonna be a string and a number. It doesn't work yet. Anyway, I need to find out. So, we are going to add some plugins to Tauri, and these plugins are a little snippet that I'm carrying out, and as you can see, it's using this log target scope, which can log a bunch of different information from our app, and these are coming from let me get, I just forgot the name, the Tauri log plugin, which we are going to go straight into our cargo toml file, and in the dependencies, we're just gonna add it over here. So now it's gonna come out defined and it's gonna work. And then as our app runs, once I fix this compilation error, we're gonna be able to log it in. So let me see how we are in time. Oh, we're approaching time here. So what we're going to do is, on the next stream, we're gonna fix those UIs, and we're going to continue and make sure that this method passes. So what we need to do at this point is handle the error. To do that, we need proper type. So on the next stream, the first thing we need to do is talk a little bit about the Spectre, the Tauri Spectre, and implement some type safety between Rust and TypeScript, and then we can continue to work on this. Okay. Where's my OBS? So the last thing I want to do, and here comes the music again. The last thing I want to do is thank you all very much for the patience in this during the technical issues that we had in this stream. I took note of all that, and next week it's not gonna happen, I promise, for sure. And I'm gonna comment out the GitHub repository for the finished app, so you can have a look at it. To be honest, the app is not entirely finished yet, but it's on a pretty much working state at this point. So you can clone it, run it a little bit, and see if we can get from where we are right now to there. I'm also going to push this one as pulsar-whip to my personal GitHub account, which is Attila Facina on GitHub. So I hope to see you on the next one. Catch you later. Bye.